Hello there everyone, my name is David Luchford and welcome to lesson 25 of my Ancient Greek course. Today we're going to be looking at 3 E-nouns and 3 F-nouns, two more subgroups of third declension nouns. But before we do that, let me show you my newest set of shelves. I now have 7 amphorae on my newest set of shelves. What a beautiful sight. I would like to say thank you very much to Dusty, Alexander and Michael. I greatly appreciate your support. And I would like to say thank you very much to everyone who has supported me in the past as well. You can see that I now have quite a number of amphorae, which makes me very happy, you know. Every new amphora I get is like an infusion of encouragement and inspiration. And something similar can be said about likes, comments, and subscriptions. So do like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoy my videos. And if you would like to add a virtual amphora or virtual amphorae to my virtual set of shelves, then you can do so by going to www.buymeacoffee.com/learnancientgreek. The link is in the description below. But for now, let's get on to 3 E-nouns and 3 F-nouns. And as a reminder, let me just mention that I have taken the labels for these subgroups from Jack's amazing Reading Greek course. I think that the subgroup system is excellent and I would love to perpetuate it. And in fact, we're actually going to use the same paradigms as in Reading Greek today. Sometimes I use different paradigms, but today we're using those from Reading Greek and ones that are used in other grammars as well. They're popular paradigms today. Until this point, we've done 3A to 3D nouns, but we're now going to talk about how to recognize 3E nouns. 3E nouns end in either is or us in the nominative singular, because there are two kinds of 3E noun. 3E nouns of the first kind end in is in the nominative singular. 3E nouns of the second kind end in us in the nominative singular. But both kinds of 3E noun end in eos in the genitive singular. And in terms of their gender, they are feminine or masculine, respectively. Typically. I say typically because it is typically the case that the 3E nouns that end in is in the nominative singular are feminine, while the 3E nouns that end in us in the nominative singular are masculine. I've discovered at least one exception in my experience of Greek though. So it's not always true, but it's typically the case that the ones in is are feminine, the ones in us are masculine. Now, we can know that a noun is a 3E noun by seeing that its nominative singular ends in is or us, and its genitive singular ends in eos. That lets us know that it's a 3E noun. What about 3 F nouns? Well, 3 F nouns end in u in the nominative singular, they end in eos in the genitive singular, and they are neuter. Now I shall not lie to you, ladies and gentlemen, there are not many 3 F nouns. In fact, the one that we're going to see as the paradigm is the only one I have seen myself in Greek texts, from what I recall. However, the one that we're going to see as the paradigm for 3 F nouns is a common noun, so it's worth learning how they decline just for that noun alone. And we would recognise that a noun is a 3 F noun by its nominative and genitive singular endings. If a noun's nominative singular ends in u and its genitive singular ends in eos, then it is a 3 F noun. So, ladies and gentlemen, what lets us know a noun subgroup is the nominative singular ending and the genitive singular ending, except for 3A nouns and 3B nouns. There, it's the genitive singular ending and the gender that matters most of all, in terms of our recognising that it's a 3A noun or a 3B noun. But everywhere else, it's the first two forms which let us know the subgroup. And I'll say now that after this lesson, we do have just 2 subgroups left, okay? So don't get demoralised. I know we're doing a lot of work with nouns at the moment. But after we finish the third declension, we shall go on to more varied things. But for now though, Let's look at some examples of 3E nouns in their dictionary form to see how we would recognise a noun as a 3E noun. Here is the noun polis, which means city or city-state. Now, before we discuss how to recognise this as a 3E noun, let me just say that you might be wondering what a city-state is. And there, let me say that ancient Greece was not one politically unified state, but rather it was composed of many city-states, like Athens and Sparta, for instance. These were individual states in their own right. Together, they made up what we call Greece. But there wasn't actually one politically unified state at the time, but rather lots of different city-states. So polis can mean city-state in that sense, but it can also just mean city. And it's where we get words like politics from, for example. Anyway, how would we recognise that polis is a 3E noun? Well, its nominative singular ends in is, and its genitive singular ends in eos. In light of that, it must be a 3E noun. And in particular, because of the is ending in the nominative singular, it must be a 3E noun of the first kind. Secondly, here we have the noun presbys, which means old man in the singular or ambassadors in the plural. It has a different meaning in the plural to the one that it has in the singular. You could also say elder instead of old man, and that's where we get the word Presbyterian from. Anyway, presbys ends in us in the nominative singular and eos in the genitive singular, and therefore it must be a 3E noun of the second kind. And now, if we look at the gender of these two nouns, you can see that what I told you about the pattern with regard to the gender of 3E nouns is the case here, because the one that ends in is in the nominative singular is feminine, the one that ends in us is masculine. But like I said, I've discovered at least one exception, so that's not always the case. But it's almost always the case. Anyway, these will be our two paradigms when we look at how 3E nouns decline in a little while. But for now, let's look at an example of a 3F noun in its dictionary form. Here is the noun astu, which means city. So we met polis just now, which means city or city-state, while astu just means city. Anyway, astu ends in u in the nominative singular, and it ends in eos in the genitive singular. Because of that, it must be a 3F noun. And like all 3F nouns, it is neuter. And this is really, as I said earlier, the only 3F noun I've seen when I've been reading Greek, according to my recollection. But I have found another 3F noun, okay? It was a task, but I did find another one that you'll see in the next lesson. But astu is a 3F noun, and it's going to be our paradigm when we look at how 3F nouns decline. But for now though, we're going to zoom in on 3E nouns and talk about them in more depth, including how they decline. As I've said, there are two kinds of 3E noun. The first kind ends in is in the nominative singular, while the second kind ends in us in the nominative singular. Both kinds end in eos in the genitive singular. 3E nouns of the first kind are typically feminine, and those of the second kind are masculine. I've said that those of the second kind are masculine rather than are typically masculine because I haven't discovered an exception in that regard. But if you have, please do share it in the comments. As we've said, examples of 3E nouns include polis, meaning city or city-state, and presbys, meaning old man, or in the plural, ambassadors. Let's now talk about how 3E nouns of the first kind decline by looking at the declension of polis. Polis declines as follows: polis, polin, poleos, polei, poli, poleis, poleis, poleon, polesin. As usual with third declension nouns, the vocative singular here is a modification of the nominative singular, and as we might expect, it's a shortened version of the nominative singular. What is a bit strange here is, although we're dealing with feminine or masculine nouns, in the accusative singular, we have a modification of the nominative singular, which is strange for third declension masculine or feminine nouns, since they usually use the oblique stem plus the ending alpha. But with three nouns of the first kind, and the second kind in fact, we have an accusative singular, which is a modification of the nominative singular. We've got in instead of is. Now everywhere else in the declension, we do have an oblique stem, which is predictable, with a set of endings added onto it. The oblique stem is ultimately pole, and this is how we can think of the other forms as being formed. The genitive singular, poleos, is pole plus os. We would expect it to be pole plus os, but for reasons I'm not going to go into here, the os has lengthened to os. So that's unexpected, and we need to remember that with three nouns, instead of os, we've got os in the genitive singular. The second unexpected thing is this epsilon has not contracted with omega. In the final form, it's still there, poleos. So we need to remember that that epsilon stays there. In the dative singular, we've got pole plus I, which is totally expected, right? Iota is the usual dative singular ending for masculine or feminine third declension nouns, and we've got it added on to the oblique stem. In the nominative plural, we've got poles, which is actually pole plus s, and that is what we would expect to happen when you have an oblique stem that ends in epsilon ultimately, and you add the ending s, which is the standard nominative plural ending for masculine or feminine third declension nouns. In the accusative plural, we have poles as well. Now this is unexpected, because we would expect pole to have us added to it. But instead, like with 3D nouns of the first kind, like trieres, what's happened here is the accusative plural has taken its form from the nominative plural. It's just borrowed the nominative plural form, which means that 3E nouns are visually identical in the nominative and accusative plural. We will need the context or the definite article to tell whether it is nominative or accusative plural. Anyway, the genitive plural is almost what we would expect. We have got pole plus orn, but the unexpected part is the epsilon does not contract with the ending orn. Okay, we have to learn that the epsilon stays there, just like how the epsilon stays there in the genitive singular. So we can remember that by remembering that the genitive forms of 3E nouns have an epsilon at the end of the oblique stem, which does not contract with the endings. In the genitive singular, we've got poleos. In the genitive plural, we've got poleorn. Finally, in the dative plural, we've got polesin. That is totally expected. We've just got pole plus sin. No issues there at all. Anyway, please do pause the video and note down all of the information on the screen so that you can learn how 3E nouns of the first kind decline. Let's now look at how 3E nouns of the second kind decline. Here is the declension of presbus. We can see that it declines as follows: presbus, presbun, presbeos, presbe, presbu, presbase, presbase, presbeorn, presbesin. Now if we've learned how 3E nouns of the first kind decline, this should be very easy, because presbus declines just like polis, except in the nominative singular, the accusative singular, and the vocative singular, we have upsilon instead of iota. So if you know how polis declines, you can remember how presbus declines just by remembering that the only difference is in the nominative singular, accusative singular, and vocative singular. Instead of iota, we have upsilon. Apart from that, it's exactly the same everywhere else. And to prove this to you, here are the declensions side by side, so you can compare them for your reference. everything's the same, apart from iota being replaced by upsilon in those three forms. And in case you were interested, that is because three nouns of the second kind also ultimately have an oblique stem that ends in epsilon. So presbe ors is presbe plus ors. The dative singular form, presbe, is presbe plus iota. The nominative plural form, presbase, is presbe plus s. The accusative plural form is a borrowing of the nominative plural form. The genitive plural form, presbe orn, is presbe plus orn, but the epsilon does not contract. Just like with polis, the epsilon doesn't contract in the genitive singular and genitive plural forms. And finally, the dative plural form is presbe plus sin, just like polis. It has an oblique stem that ends in epsilon, and the same thing happens with the endings. So please now pause the video and note down all of the information on the screen so that you can learn how three nouns of the second kind decline. Okay, finally, we are going to talk about 3F nouns in greater depth. So, as a reminder, 3F nouns end in u in the nominative singular and ors in the genitive singular, and they are all neuter. And the example, which we've already seen, is astu, meaning city. And we are going to be using that as our paradigm. So, let's talk about how 3F nouns decline. And I have good news for you. If you know how 3E nouns decline, this will be a piece of cake. Because here we have the declension of astu, and we can see that it declines as follows. Astu, astu, aster ors, aste, aster, aster, aster orn, astesin. Now, 3F nouns decline like 3E nouns, except in three ways. Firstly, instead of having is or us in the nominative singular, they've got u. And because they're neuter nouns, they have u in the accusative singular as well, because we know that neuter words in Greek are always visually identical in the nominative and the accusative singular. So here is one place that they differ. Technically two, but we can group it as one since we know that they've got to be the same since it's a neuter word. The second place where the declension differs from that of a 3E noun is in the vocative singular, because neuter nouns have a vocative singular that looks just like the nominative singular. So if you wanted to address a city using the word astu, you would still just say astu. So that's the second way in which they differ from 3E nouns. And the third and final way is in the nominative and the accusative plural. You will notice that we've got aster, aster. So the ending here is eta. Now, the reason it's eta rather than ace is because the oblique stem of astu is ultimately aster. Like 3E nouns, 3F nouns have an oblique stem which ends in epsilon ultimately. And like 3E nouns do, in the genitive and dative singular, we have the oblique stem ending in epsilon plus the endings ors and I, respectively. Now, the reason that there's a difference in the nominative and the accusative plural is because we have the oblique stem aster, but instead of adding the ending s, that is epsilon sigma, which is the standard nominative plural ending for third declension nouns which are masculine or feminine, we add alpha to that oblique stem, because alpha is the standard nominative and accusative plural ending for neuter third declension nouns. So we're using the neuter ending here rather than the masculine/feminine ending. So we take the oblique stem aster and we add the typical neuter ending a, and it becomes aster. And we do that in both forms. So that's the third way in which this declension differs from that of a 3E noun. But everywhere else, it's the same. We've got ors in the genitive singular, a in the dative singular, orn in the genitive plural, and esin in the dative plural. Uster orn is uster plus orn, and the dative plural form is uster plus sin. So the declension of ustu is the same as that of a 3e noun, except in those three respects. The nominative and the accusative plural are different. They end in u and are the same as each other. And in the vocative singular would be the same as the nominative singular, which is why I haven't put it on here. Unlike with 3e nouns, which have a unique vocative singular form. And finally, in the nominative and the accusative plural, we have er as the ending rather than ace. So please do pause the video and note down the information on the screen so that you can learn how 3F nouns decline. Okay, that does it for 3E nouns and 3F nouns. Therefore, let us now summarise our learning for lesson 25. We have learned how to recognise that a noun is a 3E noun or a 3F noun, and we learned how to recognise which kind of 3E noun it is. Whether it's one of the first kind, which ends in is in the nominative singular, or one of the second kind, which ends in us in the nominative singular. Secondly, we learned how 3E nouns and 3F nouns decline. And we've learned 3 new words: polis, meaning city or city-state, presbus, meaning old man in the singular, but ambassadors in the plural, and ustu, meaning city. But for now, I need to say thank you very much for watching. I hope that you've enjoyed the video. If you found it useful, do give it a like, and please comment with any feedback that you have about it as well. And if you wish to financially support the channel, please remember you can go to www.buymeacoffee.com/learnancientgreek. The link is in the description. But for now though, I must say thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you again next time.